What's up, everybody? My name is Patrick Onochi. This is Engineering Cannabis. I'm your cannabis engineer, your informational weed man. And today's topic will be discussing basically laws, federal laws that might be coming up soon, basically that passed through the House committee and some that passed actually through the House itself. And these laws, we'll be discussing how that's going to affect how, if it's passed through not only the House but the Senate, how it's going to basically change how marijuana or cannabis is basically dealt in the federal level. So, so these are the two basically two. We're going to discuss two laws, and these laws are basically currently looked at in the federal level. The first law we're going to look into, I'm going to go through my notes. It's the Safe Banking Act, and basically, what is the Safe Banking Act? The Safe Banking Act, also known as the Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act, is basically the law. It's a law that's just passed through the House, and it basically allows financial institutions to serve the cannabis industry. And currently, since we have problems with the financial, basically most banks basically do not allow banking activities in their banks. Most banks in every state are basically the way they deal with cannabis industry, or the way we deal with cannabis businesses are different. So the Safe Banking Act is basically supposed to rectify that situation. And with that, also financial services, that's including insurances. So some of these cannabis businesses they lack proper insurance in insuring some of their properties, or even insuring the cannabis product itself. And if you have insurance in terms of cannabis, it's very, very high in terms of the payments, or in terms of anything in terms of insurance with the cannabis space. So the Safe Banking Act is an act that basically allows financial institutions to basically deal with the cannabis industry, provide what other industries are basically provided, and the cannabis industry can be provided with those services. So some of these services, again, can be insurance, but most likely, and also one thing that you should know, since these institutions are not providing services, especially banking institutions or insurance, we have problems with, again, one of the big problems is basically data. What kind of data is basically being what kind of data has not been collected, especially with the financial institutions for cannabis? Without those data, you don't know how the market is basically moving, or how the market in the cannabis industry is basically walking. Because a lot of data is needed in terms of knowing how the cannabis market is moving and how to improve on it. So without these financial institutions not providing services, there's also lack of data in terms of where the cannabis industry is going, and what are the needs and services that needs to be provided in the cannabis space. So that's just one part of it. So the Safe Banking Act basically allows banks, insurance agencies, and all that to provide services for the cannabis space. And currently, since as we know, some of the services are lacking. So some of these cannabis industries are now basically have to store basically cash in their place of business, and with that they also have to hire security, and that's where problems occur with theft and all that. So with that they can also allow basically financial services. And also, one of the big problems is with the cannabis industry growing not only nationally or domestically, it's growing internationally. So how are businesses going to be able to basically, especially in the international market, how are American businesses going to basically go into the international market without banking services? So you can't be carrying basically a huge amount of cash across international state lines. You can, but I don't think you can carry that much. So without these banking institutions, international businesses can't basically, transactions can't occur. And without international transactions, that's a lot of money being left on the table. So with the Safe Banking Act basically addresses all these problems, providing good financial services to the cannabis space, from basically transactions to insurance to loans to all this. These are services that can be provided, because currently no banking institution will provide you any kind of loan in terms of starting your own cannabis business. If you want to start a dispensary or something, there isn't any kind of loan that a bank will basically give you to start your own cannabis business, because under one, it's still illegal Schedule I product, and two, there isn't enough data basically being collected because it's not basically allowed. So there isn't enough data to know where this market is going. So there's a lot of problems around basically the cannabis space and banking. But the Safe Banking Act, which passed through the House, which is going to go through the Senate, it's basically it's still in the House, but once it goes through the Senate, and if it passes, which that's where the fight is going to be in the Senate. Once it goes through the Senate, then it gets signed by the president, then it becomes law. Basically, now banks can basically provide services, but currently it's not. So if the first hurdle of going through the House was the huge part. Now the second part is basically going through the Senate, and that's where the problem is going. And with a majority Republican Senate, we have problems in terms of cannabis passing through that Senate currently right now. And with that, without that Safe Banking Act, there are problems in basically trying to basically do business around the world or even domestically. So that's just one, the Safe Banking Act. The second big one that passed, not through the House, but the House committee. So a committee in the House basically allowed this bill to basically pass. And it was a bill by Kamala Harris and other co-sponsors. It's called the MORE Act. The MORE Act, also known as the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act, okay, MORE Act, okay, also known as the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act. This act basically, if you go through the law, especially the MORE Act, which passed through the committee, it's a huge federal bill that just passed through the committee, and hopefully it's going to be passed through the House, and then it's going to face the Senate. And again, it's going to be a huge problem. But what does that bill state? Basically, what it does is it removes cannabis from a Schedule I. So it declassifies cannabis from Schedule I, probably make it more of an alcoholic beverage product at that point. Like Canada gave, I think, from Schedule I to Schedule III in Canada. I think in the U.S. it declassifies that from Schedule I, hopefully Schedule II or III, I'm not sure. But it's going to declassify marijuana from a Schedule I to a more lower class, which is now more accessible in terms of to consumers. So it's going to basically, that's what one of the laws is going to do. Two is going to strike, is going to end the cannabis discrimination from federal benefits and immigration. So anything that with federal benefits and immigration, and anything involving cannabis, it's not going to be a huge problem at that point because now it's more of an alcoholic beverage, like an alcoholic beverage. It's going to basically enact federal resentencing and expungement. So currently in different states, different states are basically expunging records that have cannabis crime in there, cannabis-related crime. Different states are doing that and trying to expunging records with individuals who have cannabis criminal records in there. Now on the federal side, they're going to try to enact that same aspect, expunging records with or resentencing or expungement of records with that kind of cannabis criminality in there. It's going to institute a 5% tax. It's also going to create, and this one is going to create a cannabis justice office. So it's going to create its own cannabis justice office that looks at criminality in terms of cannabis itself and cannabis use. Like alcohol and all that, laws will be enacted. Something like laws laws especially with the DUI and alcohol. When you DUI, the amount of alcohol in your body and all that. Laws like that will be enacted with this bill passed. And this is an important one. It's going to start tracking and tracing race and gender in the industry. So currently there isn't much tracking in terms of race and gender. And I always talk about this as social experiment and social engineering, where we're going to start looking at the effects of cannabis in different groups and different areas and track how, over the years, what are the adverse effects, the positive and negative of how cannabis is being introduced into different communities. So that's going to be tracked. That's going to be studied, and federal grants will be allocated to different research. Again, social engineering, different research on the effect of health, wealth, and business, or health, wealth, and community, the effects of all that in the community. You also see research on the incarceration rate of cannabis and how that has basically either reduced incarceration or increased incarceration rate in certain communities. So that will be looked at. So, and also now with the Small Business Bureau or Small Business Administration, that the services will be provided for cannabis space at that point. So the MORE Act is basically trying to declassify. The big points of the MORE Act is declassifying cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a lower bracket, maybe Schedule 2 or 3, like Canada. It's going to create opportunity in terms of research and all that. It's going to create expungement activities to remove records with minor cannabis infractions. So there's going to be a lot of, with the MORE Act, there's going to be a lot of basically looking into federally legalizing cannabis as a product similar to alcohol or any kind of that provides a little bit of hallucinogenic properties. So it's going to provide that. So basically what I'm trying to say is with what, like the alcohol prohibition, the first stage of the alcohol prohibition focused on the financial. So this is like the Safe Banking Act focused on the financial. Then the MORE Act also focused on the financial and focused on the expungement and the classification. So right now, once the financial has been set, even with the MORE Act, there's this 5% tax citation on it for the federal government. So again, it's focusing on not only the financial and all that, but it's going to focus on other things. The big part is the declassification of cannabis from a Schedule 1 to a lower bracket. So those are the important two laws that have been enacted: the Safe the Safe Banking Act and the MORE Act, which was done this week. Those two laws are basically what is going to basically try to move into the federal legalization of cannabis. The more but the question is now, these are just coming out of the House. It's going to move to the Senate, and we need to know how. Now the question is, with a Republican ruled Senate, what are the likelihood that these two laws are going to pass through the Senate and then move to basically become law with the president signing it. So these are the two laws that are basically that are basically trying to legalize cannabis in the federal level. Again, these are important because the more you know about what's going on in terms of the politics around it, the more you can get access to not only wealth but access to information on how the cannabis industry will basically begin to move. Again, my name is Patrick Kanoshi. I'm a cannabis engineer, your informational weed man, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.